In the early part of the narrative, we witness Dan and his group plunging into the water amidst a conflict. The tale then takes us back 28 years prior, when Dan is employed as a biology instructor at an educational institution, residing alongside his spouse M.A. and offspring Muri. Dan shows an eagerness to engage at a military research laboratory and has submitted his application for employment there. With his evaluation arranged for that day, Dan returns to his dwelling, where a Yuletide celebration is underway. He informs Amy concerning the impending interview, which angers her as she wanted Dan to spend the day with his family. Amy also mentions that Dan's father sent Muri a Christmas card, which upsets Dan because he hates his father for abandoning him. Since then, Dan hasn't spoken to his father. Later, while on his way to the interview, Dan receives a call informing him that he has been rejected and the job was given to someone else. Furious, Dan throws his files in the trash and enters his home, where he sits down to watch a football match with Muri and Amy. During a match, suddenly a portal opens and a multitude of soldiers emerge from it. Lieutenant Hart, the leader of these soldiers, appears and informs everyone that they have come from the future. In the year 2051, a war broke out between humans and aliens known as Wild Spikes, and they are losing this war. If the situation persists in the next 11 months, the human race will be completely eradicated from Earth. Everyone is urged to assist so they can win this war. Following this incident, countries across the globe begin recruiting civilians into their armies to send them to the future. However, the future world's human population dwindles below 500,000. Moreover, with 50% of those sent to the future losing their lives, people start questioning and protesting the deployments. Indeed, everyone is sent for only 7 days. If they survive those days, they return to the past. Distressed by the situation, Muri starts crying, and she advises her mother to avoid peering into the future, as Dan is able to soothe Muri with conversation. Subsequently, Nine, while present in the classroom, gets an unexpected alert on his mobile phone. In reality, Dan has been hastily summoned to the military research facility. Dan hurries over, anticipating potential employment, but upon getting there, he finds his hand being inserted into a contraption by the soldiers. At that point, Dan is informed about his future combat deployment. They further disclose his predicted death in 7 years' time. Before Dan can inquire further, they attach a device to his wrist for tracking purposes, cautioning that any tampering might result in incarceration. Dan is afforded a day to organize his private matters before his conscription for military training. Despite Dan's opposition, the events unfold without his consent, leaving him powerless. Subsequently, we encounter Amy, a therapist, providing guidance to individuals who have returned from future engagements. Later, Dan arrives and tells Amy that he is being sent to the year 2051. Amy, knowing the return is difficult, advises Dan against going. Dan explains that he can't do anything since they have put a tracker on his hand. Amy suggests he seeks his father's help, as only his father can remove the device. Subsequently, Dan visits his father, who agrees to remove it. But as they reminisce about the past, an argument ensues. Angry, Dan leaves without having the device removed and tells Amy that he must go to war. Amy cries upon hearing this, but Dan promises her he will return in 7 days. He bids farewell to Muri and heads to the research center, where Dan and many others are to be sent to the future. Here, everyone is given an army uniform and assigned to different teams. Zane. Yes, a girl asks, why can't they kill the enemies before the war starts using a time machine? To which an officer present there explains that their time machine can only travel 30 years in time, allowing them only to go back and forth between 2051 and 2022. Furthermore, they are informed that their enemies are not humans but aliens. At night, Dan talks to his friend Charlie. As this conversation ensues, an emergency alarm starts ringing. Lieutenant Hart immediately orders everyone to travel to the future. The plan was originally to take them after completing their training, but Lieutenant Hart reports that the aliens have attacked their research lab. If the lab is destroyed, they would lose the war. Consequently, everyone is gathered at a location and then, one by one, sent to the future. During this process, a malfunction occurs within the system, resulting in all of them hanging in the sky instead of reaching the ground, and they begin to fall down, one by one. This is the same scene shown at the beginning of the story. Here, Dan and others fall into a swimming pool while the rest hit the ground and die. shocked by the conditions they find with aliens everywhere. Later, we see the Colonel of the future world who contacts the survivors. She appoints Dan as the team leader and instructs him to rescue the people trapped in the research lab. Dan heads to the lab with his team. They reach the lab only to discover that the aliens have killed everyone. When the Colonel finds out about this, she is very saddened and instructs Dan to retrieve a hard drive from the lab. They don't have much time as the aliens were about to enter the lab. Subsequently, the Colonel orders Dan to also take all the biological material stored in the lab. As extraterrestrial beings begin to advance, the military opts to obliterate the laboratory to ensure its total destruction. The Colonel notifies Dan and his team that a mere 3 minutes remain until the detonation of the lab. However, during their escape from the facility, the extraterrestrials launch an assault on them. Extraterrestrial beings are immensely strong and bullets do not harm them. Amidst the extraterrestrial onslaught, a number of Dan's colleagues perish. When the survivors emerge from the laboratory, scores of aliens appear, pursuing them. Simultaneously, military forces engage but are slain by the invaders. Trapped, Dan and his companions engage in defense against the alien horde. Soon after, a bomb is detonated, causing a huge explosion that kills all the aliens. Many of Dan's companions are also killed or injured in the blast. When Dan wakes up, he finds himself in a camp. It turns out that only his friend Charlie survived the blast besides him. When they emerge from the camp, they see another member of their team. He goes by the name Dorian, a man who has voyaged to the future thrice. Questioned by Dan on his fearlessness towards death, Dorian confesses he is terminally ill with cancer and has a mere half year ahead. He chooses to embrace his final days courageously and perish on the battlefield rather than await fate idly at home. A pair of soldiers appear, directing Dan to accompany them, while Dorian, along with Charlie, are ordered to return to the research facility. Dan entrusts Charlie's well-being to Dorian, knowing Charlie is frightened and reluctant to go back. Conversely, as Dan encounters the Colonel, he is astonished to find she is his grown daughter Muri, who has aged in the future. Elated at the sight of Muri with the rank of Colonel, Dan is moved to tears of joy. On the verge of an emotional embrace, Muri restrains him, revealing that her motives for summoning Dan were not sentimental but mission-driven. Intrigued about her reasons, Dan inquires, and Muri promises to disclose the information at the right moment, leading him indoors to brief him on the predatory white spike females. Muri delves into the details of the female alien, noting her formidable intellect and stealth, choosing to domicile her brood beneath the Earth's surface. Male aliens, fiercely loyal, guard this female, readily laying down their lives for her safeguard. Muridan tells Dan to take her on a mission. On this mission, she wants to capture a female alien to create a toxin from its DNA which can kill all the aliens. In fact, everyone had been killing male aliens, but killing female aliens was difficult. If the female aliens are killed, then no more will be born, and by killing the remaining ones, they will save the world. After that, they all go to the place where the female aliens lived underground. Muridan tells Dan to stay above while she goes down too. Sees the female extraterrestrial. These extraterrestrials possess considerable strength and signal their male allies for assistance. Quickly, numerous extraterrestrials converge on the location. Witnessing this, Dan descends to save his offspring. They ultimately apprehend the extraterrestrial and transport it to the facility via chopper. Yet afterwards, a horde of extraterrestrials commence an assault, resulting in the loss of numerous troops. In the interim, Dan and Muridan board a military vehicle, with Dan at the helm and Muridan discharging at the aliens. Subsequently, they reach a beach where there were no aliens. An irritated Muridan asks Dan why he came down from the helicopter, to which Dan replies that she is his daughter and he couldn't just sit by when she was in danger. Muridan reveals that when she was 12, Dan left her and her mother, and then, years later, he supposedly died. This was the reason why Muridan was not happy to see Dan. Seeing Muridan crying, Dan feels deeply saddened. He doesn't understand why he left his family. Shortly after, a helicopter arrives and takes them to an army center in the middle of the sea. This place was made so special that no alien could enter. It is here that they keep the captured female alien. Her blood sample is taken for extracting the DNA. Upon checking the DNA, they realize that many more samples and thousands of tests will be needed. Only then will they be able to create a toxin. Once the toxin is created, they will be able to kill all the aliens with ease. She diligently processes each DNA sample, yet she hasn't discovered the ideal DNA strand. Currently, these samples top out at 60% and 50%. Throughout the night, Muri examines them without achieving the results she seeks. That's when Dan steps in, advising Muri to take a break. Having been present for a week, Dan is due to return to the year 2022. He inquires about the reason for her summoning him. Muri explains that in the event this toxin is synthesized, it falls upon him to transport it to his realm. For producing more of this substance here would require a considerable amount of time. However, in his world, there would be ample time to manufacture it. Once formulated, the toxin might avert warfare in their dimension. Amidst their conversation, they notice a DNA sample exhibiting 100% toxicity. Suddenly, a female alien awakens with a piercing scream, drawing the attention of all the nearby male aliens. The alien horde was vast, making it an arduous task to eliminate them. The extraterrestrial beings begin to savagely dispose of the troops. Amidst the chaos, Dan and Muri stay side by side. In the turmoil, the male aliens liberate their female counterpart. Dan must urgently find his way to the portal leading back to 2022. By this point, numerous aliens had converged upon them. They fend off the assault when the female alien lunges at Muri, inflicting an injury. Dan helps the wounded Muri as they activate the time travel apparatus. Muri apologizes to him, saying she loves him very much. Dan wanted to take his daughter to the past as well, so he sits beside her. But then the female alien arrives and captures Muri. Before Dan can save her, the time machine sends him back to 2022. Along with Dan, Charlie Dorian and some others had also come. Dan gives the toxin to Lieutenant Hart and tells her to make it in large quantities and send it to the future. Lieutenant Hart explains that the jump link is now closed, meaning they can no longer use the time machine. Therefore, they have lost the war. After that, Dan meets his wife. Dan was very sad about Muri's death in the future. When he comes home and sees Muri, he hugs her and sits in her room all night. After which, Amy comes to him. Then Dan tells her about future Muri. Now Dan thinks of doing something to stop the war in the future. So he first goes to Dorian and asks for an alien's nail, which Dorian had kept with him after going to the future. After that, they take the nail to Charlie. When Charlie researches the nail, they find out that it has volcanic ash on it. Charlie says that this ash is from a volcano that erupted in China. Then Dan says that Lieutenant Hart had told them that the first alien attack happened in Russia. So why is there ash from a Chinese volcano in their nails? Then Dan remembers a student who knew a lot about the topic of volcanoes. So the three of them go to him, where the student explains that 1,000 years ago, a volcano erupted in China, the waves of which also reached Russia and then turned into ash and settled there. After some time, that place got covered with ice. After knowing all this, they understand that an alien ship must have come there and then got buried under the ice, which surfaced on Earth after the ice melted in 2051. After that, and Charlie goes to the defensive security and tells them all the theory and asks them to go to Russia and kill all the aliens before the war, but he does not believe their theory and refuses to support them. So the three of them decide to go there themselves and kill the aliens. Now Dan goes to his father for help because he had a plane. Dan tells his father everything and says that he will have to go to the glacier island in Russia to kill the aliens, for which he will need their plane and a pilot. Dan's father agrees to his words and gets ready to go with him. In addition to this, Dan had already manufactured a lot of toxin with Lieutenant Hart's help, with which they go to Russia. Dan had taken a team with him. They all reach above the glacier island and detonate a blast to go underground, where they find an alien ship which had crashed a long time ago. Entering inside, they see the dead bodies of aliens. Here they learn that some aliens are sleeping to keep themselves alive, after which they start killing the sleeping aliens with a toxin. During this, a female alien wakes up and attacks them all. Then Dorian instructs everyone to leave the ship while contemplating to end everything by destroying the ship. Afterward, the aliens start coming out one by one, whom Dan's father shoots and kills. However, due to the sheer number of aliens, Dorian is forced to blast the ship, which results in Dorian's own death. Only Charlton and his father survive. Dan's father reveals that one alien has escaped. Both of them then search for it and cleverly shoot it. The extraterrestrial being is female, immensely strong and not easily defeated. She escapes the area and conceals herself, launching an attack on Dan. Observing this, Dan's dad intervenes to protect him. Shortly after, she turns her assault towards Dan's father. Dan swiftly rises to the occasion and eliminates the alien threat. Subsequently, Dan heads back to his residence, escorted by his dad. Dan is now determined to avoid any errors that might break his family apart. And on this note, the film